Welcome to a special version of White Pill Radio, the roughly every other episode version of Theology on Air, which is an outgrowth of Theology by the Pint, which is a monthly gathering in Houston around craft beer where we talk about political, social, theological, ethical issues in a fun and lighthearted way. You should check out for sure theologybythepint.org. Theologybythepint.org. About our events, our leadership team, how you can donate, because this is ad-free, okay? Because one of the last podcasts that's ad-free, I think, out there in the universe, because we just get donations from you. So please help us out, become a member, do all the good things, check out the website, subscribe. We're trying to build out our subscribers, of course. We started to make shorts now, right? So if you see a short, be sure to like it. That helps the algorithm. And we're trying to make Mother Computer happy. So theologybythepint.org. White Pill Radio, though, because we can't cover everything, we have this podcast, and I would say that this is ultimately hopeful, post-apologetic, applied theology, where we look at news and current events from a Christian worldview. I like to say that this is blessed talk, but not happy talk. And I'm Evan McClanahan. I'm the pastor at First Lutheran, and I do stuff with Theology by the Pint as well. And with me, two old friends. Such good friends that I might even invite them over to my house for Thanksgiving. Actually, y'all are welcome if you want to stop by. Anyway, so this is Cody. Cody, who are you, and where can people find you?
Hey, what's up? My name's Cody Pogue. I'm a Houston area college professor, and you can find me on TikTok, CodyPogue.
There you go. You can maybe stumble across all of our shorts at the same time.
There we go.
That's short video, not like our pants. And Adam.
I'm Adam Ellwanger. I am a professor of rhetoric at the University of Houston downtown. You can find me on X at 1, the numeral 1, heretical truth.
Very cool. So give him a follow. Give everyone a follow. Okay, well, it is the day before Thanksgiving. I'm going to try to get this out, I don't know, today or very soon around the Thanksgiving time. So I thought we would start just by saying one thing we don't like about Thanksgiving, in all fairness, and then a couple of things we do very quickly. So I'll start. I would say that I'll start with that, it's easier, that our nation prioritize a spirit of gratitude, and it's, ensconced in our calendar, because being an ingrate is basically destructive to any kind of society that works. It's corrosive to your soul. It's corrosive to the body politic. So being an ingrate is bad. Intentionally giving thanks, it's all over the Bible. Like giving thanks to God is just all over the Bible. So we built that in. I don't want to say it's uniquely American, but it's especially American. So that's something I like.
Yeah, I like that we have a day where we all come together. Family, I think, is the cornerstone of our society, and families coming together. A lot of times family, we separate and we go off to our colleges and our different cities, but we have a few holidays every year where we come home for the holidays, and I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I agree with both of you guys on those points. One thing that I really like about Thanksgiving is that it's not overly ceremonial. There are holidays where the family gets together and there's a lot of things that you have to do. Thanksgiving, basically revolves around the meal and simply spending time with each other. And that's one of the things I always appreciate about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I'm hosting for the first time in like a decade. And I haven't cooked a turkey in like a decade. So actually, someone's bringing a smoked turkey. So I don't even have to do that. So anyway, I would say maybe that's what I don't like about it, is just it can be a little chaotic and frenzied. And what I actually value in life is just having good conversations with people. And you think that's going to happen at Thanksgiving, and it often doesn't, because the dogs are running around chasing each other, or, it's just loud and a little bit chaotic because everyone's together. But it's a joy, and I'm glad for it, and I look forward to it. But I do value like smaller groups and good conversations, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So yeah. I had to pick something I didn't like, so.
Yeah. Man, I hate to be negative. Now that I think of it, I have two. One is, historically, Thanksgiving is a Civil War holiday instituted by Abraham Lincoln to give thanks. And it had nothing at all to do with the Pilgrims in 1620 or 1621. Nothing to do with that. That's something we came up with later. And I'm like, what about the historical inaccuracy? But no, one of the things that I would change about Thanksgiving is I would move the date. As much as I like that Abraham Lincoln put it in the end of November, I think it's horrible for the school calendar as a professor. I think it should be at the beginning of October, so we get a week-long break right in the middle of the semester instead of get a week off, come back and review for final exams, do final exams, and then get 3 weeks off. Just horrible timing. He wasn't thinking about the school calendar.
Yeah, but the pecans haven't fallen yet. You can't have pecan pie. The turkeys aren't, being hunted yet.
We're innovators.
It's got to be cold. Yeah.
I think, two things I don't like. One is that I do feel like Thanksgiving is increasingly secularized, just like everything else in our society. I think that... what are we giving thanks to?
Oh, yeah.
Presumably God. And I feel like increasingly we say what we're thankful for, but not who we're thankful to. I think that is happening. And then, there's the... my students, I was talking to them about Thanksgiving, my college students, and they're like, well, what about the Indians? What about what we did to the Indians, right? And there's just an increasing irreverence toward myth, right? And Americans remembered what they wanted to remember and forgot what they wanted to forget, right? And I don't understand why, we all have to sort of adopt a position of artificial penitence towards historical injustice, right? On a day that we're just supposed to be thankful for all the many blessings that we have.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Let's debate Native Americans for the next hour. Land acknowledgments.
I have some things to say.
Anybody see the guy dancing at the school board this week?
Yes.
That kind of went viral on social media. Matt Walsh did a whole bit about it. The guy was clearly not doing a ceremonial dance. I mean, sorry, he had the headdress, but that was it. Anyway, I don't know. I mean, I got to think of something else I like. It's not hard. I like the food. I don't know. I mean, is that too obvious? I mean, maybe you should state the obvious sometimes. It's kind of funny that a meal like turkey and stuffing, we don't make that more often. It's actually all things considered, a pretty cheap meal. Yeah. Anybody see the viral thing going around where it talked about how much it cost in 1981?
Yeah.
It was like a news clip from Albuquerque or something. And what was funny, they added up how they made the food. And I'm going, none of it was real food. Okay. It was pumpkin pie. It's pumpkin in a can. Okay. Cool Whip. Okay. Green beans in a can. Almost none of it was freshly made food. And that made me kind of sad that even for the last 45 years, we've been having Thanksgiving meals out of a can. We have to do better, people. We have to do better. But all in all, the food's pretty good, so I like that.
Yeah, I actually appreciate the canned stuff, partly because I associate it with my grandparents who lived through the Depression and never got out of the Depression.
Yeah.
They lived like they were in the Depression for the rest of their life. But I don't know, we don't eat that anymore. I'm in Texas, so we're eating barbecue and tamales. And so I appreciate the food as well. So,
yeah.
I like the food about as much I like all day long football. I think that the NFL should do this every week where we have sort of a game that starts at 10 a.m., one that starts at 1, and then one that starts in the evening or whatever.
Yeah, they almost do. I mean, it used to be Sunday and Monday night. Monday night was an innovation. Then they did Thanksgiving, but then they added Thursday as a normal thing. Then when college football stops, they go to Saturday.
Yes.
I just wish they weren't so woke. I wish I didn't have that feeling about the NFL. You know what I'm saying?
It's kind of receding for me. In 2020, 21, 22.
Yeah.
And to be frank, we still haven't, ended racism.
Right.
Hey, so it has to stay on the field. It has to stay there till we're done.
That brings up a philosophical conversation of when will racism end? How will we know? They say in corporate America you should have measurable goals. Yeah. So tell me.
As a rhetorician, I would say that it ends when we stop talking about it.
Oh, interesting. Yes, it's like a self-sustaining industry.
Yeah, I don't know. As long as it's there, I think you have to talk about it, right? When you look at the statistics about biases and juries and policing and so much criminal justice stuff, we still see it there. I don't know how you fix racism. This would be the whole show and so much more. But I do think.
Okay, are only white people racist?
It depends on what your definition of racism is. But according to my definition, no. But according to a definition that racism can only be top down from people of power down to those below, then yes, it would. But it just comes down to semantics of what you define it as.
What was the there was a jubilee, was it a jubilee about this? I can't remember. Anyway, there's some podcast or some show or something, and it was a question of whether or not only white people can be racist or something. And it is kind of the whole ball of wax, really. Like, if we could agree that everyone can be racist, like, and it's something that you would evaluate person to person, then then we can have that conversation. But the way it is talked about structurally, like academically, it is only white people who can be racist. I was told that explicitly multiple times in my student career. And it's like, well, then the game is rigged, and then it's going to create a backlash, and that's part of what we'll talk about today.
And honestly, I think most of our problems in our society, most of our big debates aren't really debates. They're not really disagreements. We're disagreeing on definitions. And if we could say, this is the definition, this is how we're defining this word, so many things we would be like, oh yeah, we all agree on that. We're just disagreeing on how we're defining this word or this group of words, not on actual substance, things. So
yeah. I guess I'm going to let my nationalist side show and remind everybody that one of the things that we have to be thankful for is that we live in the most accessible, the most tolerant, the most equitable nation on the history of the planet. Yeah. And this is a uniquely American fixation to look at, these aspects, which I think are really conditions of the human heart and not distinctive national characteristics and sort of fixate on them. Yeah. When I think that we have more or rather less of this kind of sentiment in America than in almost every other country. I mean, I think there's more racism in Mexico.
Or Asia.
But I had an experience in the last week. So I've got a close friend that lives in Argentina, and we get on Zoom and talk every now and then. And Argentina, what's that, our 52nd state after Israel?
Well, they do have good beef, I hear.
I hear, right?
Yeah.
But she had just finished watching the TV show Welcome to Derry, and there's a scene that talks about, like, it's set in the 1950s, right? Okay. So there's some scenes of racism. And she was like, why do y'all say y'all are the best country in the world when they were like doing these things to black people? And I'm like, well, it's we've got a lot of great things, right? And I think it's complicated. I like to take an informed patriotic approach where I'm like, I understand our problems, but I understand all the good stuff as well, and I love my home. Yeah. But I think there's some people who America's great no matter what, can't do no wrong, and then there's the opposite that's like America's evil in every possible way. And I think we have to hold both of those things and still say, this is our home. I love the place I live. I love the people I live with. I love my family. Yeah.
Well, your friend is a perfect example of the brainwashing that has taken place through Hollywood propaganda. Yes, I mean, of course, racism did exist, and no one's denying that. But one of my favorite memes is it's where there's a graph, and then there's like a cameraman, right, looking at a camera, and he's only focusing on one, like the small, like, part of the graph, not like the most obvious parts of the data the graph is actually showing you, but it's focusing in. So, like, we could tell, I mean, every story, you have to choose an arc, you have to choose characters, you have to choose a plot. Same with history. You have to choose, you can't tell the whole story of civilization, so you have to kind of pick and choose. And it's obvious that what Hollywood has chosen to tell is a story, and what historians have chosen to tell, even as I mentioned before, I kind of joke for the last 5 episodes we recorded. I say I'm reading a biography of George Washington, but it is true because I'm a slow reader and it's a big book. But slavery is like a major part of the conversation. He had slaves. How did he treat his slaves? The contradiction of presiding over the the Constitution, and yet he owned slaves. The author doesn't dwell on it, nor does he. He does indicate that. He does treat his slaves, all things considered, pretty well. But it's like we all, and I think y'all have probably heard like what has gone on at Vernon and Monticello, like these kind of like liberal nonprofits that run these things. They've turned the entire exercise and experience of visiting these historic homes into a teaching about slavery. Mm-hmm. And it just wasn't, it just wasn't the entire reality of existence of America. It just wasn't. Yeah. It's not that it was good. For example, I was debating with college students the other day, and I said, I just find it really difficult to accept that college students, they don't have a love of our country, they don't have an understanding of our founding, they don't want to learn, they just write off all of the founding fathers and almost all of their ideas. They're essentially year zero progressives or what have you, leftist or whatever. And the first thing this girl said was, well, yeah, but George Washington, did you know that he purchased teeth from slaves? Because he actually didn't have wooden teeth. It was a common practice. Yeah. And he would buy good teeth from slaves. And it's ghastly for us to think about. I got it. But I'm like, well, okay. And I don't want to have to defend like pulling teeth out of people's head. Okay. But I'm like, they were paid. It was, like I said, it was a common practice. And I'm like, when I think about all the things, like to think about like with the American Revolution and like the principles of America and self-government, like dental procedures would not be the first on my list. And again, I'm not defending it. I am saying that it's a different time, and that was a tangent. Apologies. Anyway, did we all say two things we're thankful for and one thing we don't like about Thanksgiving?
I think so.
All right, happy Thanksgiving. Okay. Well, let's jump in. You actually sent out the official proclamation of Thanksgiving that Lincoln put out. I actually like to remind myself every Thanksgiving of the. Because I kind of forget. We tell the Pilgrim story, and then there's this thing about Lincoln. So anyway, it's a good reminder that this officially became a holiday at the hand of Abraham Lincoln, like you said, in 1863. Yeah. He said it was the last Thursday of the month. Yes. It's now the 4th, and I do want to say something about that. But any thoughts? Any other thoughts? You mentioned it was during the Civil War, and that's pretty sad. So
yeah, no, I really love this document. Basically, in Abraham Lincoln's proclamation of Thanksgiving, he talks about all the problems that they're having. We're in this Civil War. All these bad things are happening. But then he's like, there's good things happening too. Europe hasn't turned against us. They have reason to. They want cheap cotton, right? The South can give them cheap cotton. There's reason that they could turn against us, and that would be so bad. And he kind of goes through the things that we should be thankful for as a nation as well. And I just love this idea of in the middle of our nation's lowest moment, he's like, but we still have reason to be thankful. We still have reason to be hopeful. And he says, no human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out these great things. They are the gracious gifts of the Most High God, who while dealing with us in anger for our sins has nevertheless remembered mercy. Right. And you can kind of see this idea of, America still having this idea of, it was never like a denominational God. It was, the creator that Jefferson talked about, but this kind of public religion. And I like that. I like seeing that in Lincoln's writings.
Yeah, there's in this book about Washington, but there's a lot of debate about whether he was a Christian. I definitely think that he was, but when he speaks about God, it's usually like providence with a capital P.
Right. And same with Lincoln. Yeah. I've read some biographies on Lincoln where it's like, is he a deist? Yeah. Did he certainly he wasn't evangelical, right? Not by any stretch of the imagination. But there's John Meacham in his book American Gospel kind of talks about this American public religion of providence, of in God we trust, God bless our troops, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, how long will that last?
I don't know.
Will it? I mean, are we losing it?
I don't know. I think it's becoming secularized increasingly. Yeah. But I will say this, just sort of echo Lincoln's sentiment. I won't go into the personal reasons, but this has been by far the most difficult year of my life. It has also been the one with the greatest blessings. And I do think that kind of turmoil, whether it's personal or national, it has a way of clarifying how much you actually have been given.
Puts things into stark relief. Yeah, for sure. I just want to point out, like I said, he said last Thursday of November. Well, that could be the 5th Thursday of the month. So why isn't it? And I researched that. Like I said, deep dive on AI. Took all of 5 seconds. And it was instituted by Congress, although talked about in the 30s, instituted in 1941, because a November 29th or 30th Thanksgiving would encroach in the Christmas shopping season.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow,
Capitalism.
they were worried about like the commercial benefits of Christmas leaching too much into November in the 40s. I thought that was a modern thing. So I guess I feel a little bit better about the like disgusting commercialism of the season now. That's been around for a long time.
Now the Christmas season starts about 2 weeks before Halloween.
Yeah. I mean, no joke. I mean, I am man yells at clouds. I know that, but like it is truly grotesque at how it is, and it is getting earlier and earlier.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and I think it's partly capitalism, but I also think it's that as Americans, we've just lost a lot of the things that make us happy in life, right? And we've become unhappy in so many ways.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Christmas is one of those things that still makes everybody happy. So it's like, come on, just go ahead and just make it happen.
Yeah.
You know?
well, yeah, and like retail stores make like half of their
that
money
as well,
and stuff
yes.
like that. Yeah.
The older I get, the more convinced I am that the nation's spiritual malaise is a direct effect of our material affluence. I think that as our lives get more and more comfortable and things abound, you know, the spirit is kind of hollowed out.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, there are talks that we're in some kind of a revival after Charlie Kirk's death, and I'm not seeing any evidence of that myself. But I guess I'm hopeful, you know. But
we've had more visitors to my church in the last month than I think we did in all of the previous year.
yeah, I mean, I think a revival, just practically speaking, is sort of inevitable because, as I've said 1,000 times, the humanist secularist experiment has failed. I mean, you know, we are an unhappy people. We're not reproducing. I mean, any marker historically that, I mean, in fact, one of the things Abraham Lincoln talks about is the population has grown.
Yeah.
I mean, like literally, like amid all the bad things happening, the earth has produced more food and the population has grown. So it's like that is how people in the old world, you know, measured like human flourishing, human success, and that's not happening now. And if you talk about it, you're kind of thought to be a bit of a nut. So, but yeah, so there are many indications that we're like not a happy people, and that's not good. So anyway, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that you know, that'll happen, but it's sometimes it does feel like a cash grab, you know, this toward the end of the year here. But okay, well, tell us about America being a creedal nation. Give us some background on that.
Well, it caught my eye this week that Gordon Wood, arguably the preeminent historian of the American founding, gave a talk that was later published in abridged form in the Wall Street Journal, where he weighs in on this debate about whether American identity is strictly creedal in nature. That is, whether or not what it means to be an American is to believe certain principles that animated the founding of the country. He Wood sort of attacks what he calls blood and soil nationalists, who would tie American identity more to lineage and land. And Wood goes all in and says, yes, American identity is fundamentally creedal, and any other account of American identity is somehow dangerous or antithetical to the spirit of the nation. This bothered me because I think that this is a fashionable idea, but we could ask ourselves, is it possible that someone who was born in Moscow and lived their entire life in Russia would assent to the principles of the American founding? And it's entirely possible, right? So in other words, there could be somebody who's never left Moscow who shares our creed. They're not American, so obviously there's something in excess of the creed. Yeah. And I think that sort of the left-leaning academic cartel and the American establishment is very scared of any account of American identity now that isn't just sort of purely abstract.
America's an idea.
Right. And so, I thought that the fact that Wood weighed in on this, his word will carry a lot of weight. And I think it sort of signified to me that maybe this debate is reaching a higher level of salience.
And the fact that it's in the deep state Wall Street Journal.
Right.
Not a conservative publication, in case our friends were wondering. But yes, I mean, I used to think that it was, but it's clearly not. But I mean, if they're giving it,
right,
a positive spin, then they're kind of blessing, the Murdoch Empire is kind of blessing the idea. Well, so let's break it apart a little bit. So, in case people don't know the word creedal, right? I mean, we say it every Sunday. The Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, statement of belief, right? Credo, Latin means I believe, right? So, so the idea is that to be a creedal nation is unique from saying, for example, a nation biblically, I think would argue is largely ethnic. The word, yes, there are certain passages about boundaries and things like that, but even like the 12 tribes are given direct like boundaries, but almost every tribe is within itself a nation, and the nation is ethnic. And most of the world, I'm certain, thinks of themselves as a nation based on ethnic preferences. The Japanese are an ethnicity that is very different, they would think, from the Koreans and from the Chinese, and the Chechens and the Russians are very different ethnically, and they would consider themselves, essentially different nations in many respects, even if they're under, the Russian purview. Anyway, so the argument is, America's unique, though, because of our founding. We established a set of beliefs that if you consent to, then that's good enough for us. And my main question I'm going to get to, though, is, but don't you need certain cultural understandings? They would have to dovetail with those beliefs as well. But I want to get to that in a second. So what is the American creed? Like, I don't remember if he says it, but I would say...
I will defer to the historian on that.
I mean, I would just say we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men for the consent of the governed.
Bam!
I guess my critique of that would be, really, that's pretty weak sauce. And in other words, a lot of words you just said there, you can imbue with whatever meaning you want to imbue them with. Right. And we've even gotten to a point where even the creed is too much for many of the sort of bug men in America, right? Mm-hmm. We bring people in from all over the world, many of whom are actively opposed to the ideals in the creed. And so we boil down essentially American identity to American citizenship at best, or simple presence within the boundaries of the country.
Right. Well, you see this like in Minneapolis. Okay. Easiest example, you have, literally the guy who, of course, they have a screwy ranked choice voting and all that. And so
Somalis.
The Somalis guy doesn't win because the other Somali tribe voted against him and with the white guy, and there was this big brouhaha about like, okay, it's better to have a Somali than a white guy, and the other tribe is like, no, it's better that your tribe loses. And so we're seeing like tribal identity. That's the exact opposite of the American creed. The exact the whole purpose of the American creed is that your tribe is something you left behind when you left that country.
Yeah,
they're bringing it into our elections.
A similar narrative is, once Muslims have taken power over town boards in Michigan, they have banned the pride flag, and the LGBT community says, what a betrayal!
Yeah,
it's
like, that was there was an amazing quote. It was in England, and I know we talked about it on the show a couple months back, where there was a lady at a city council meeting, basically saying, "You people are so ungrateful for all that we've done for you." And it's like, but Islam generally would say, I think this is a cliche, but it's very true, which is like among Muslims, they would all say that as long as they're in the minority, Islam is a religion, and they're just looking for equal religious rights. But the moment they have enough power, not necessarily even majority power at all, because you can exercise a lot of power as a minority. But once you have enough power, then it becomes political. And that's what you see. And that's why every Muslim nation, that's what Sharia law is.
But I think that's why religious liberty and the First Amendment are so important, right? It protects.
What does that mean?
I mean,
what is really? Yeah, I mean, all these words. It's like, well,
Right.
religious liberty. Well, what did they mean?
At first, the First Amendment. It means that the government cannot support any religion, but the government can also not take religious freedom away from an individual.
Yeah.
Right. So,
But what religious? Like what religion?
any religion, right?
Well, that's the debate.
This leads into one of our articles, right, that we were going to talk about.
Yes, for sure.
cool.
Yeah, the cult article.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to pick on you or I'm just what I'm saying is that this is why we don't do White Pill Radio on Zoom, okay? Because I want the right to interrupt.
Yes.
Okay. My question is, when they said religious freedom, I think you can make a strong argument that they meant denominational freedom among states, which had in their own constitutions, and there's a famous clip of Charlie Kirk, point by point explaining how this worked at the founding, that whole states would have commitments to certain denominational beliefs. And they basically said, and again, George Washington, this was one of his concerns the whole time. In fighting the British, the Union was too weak, and they didn't send enough soldiers, and there wasn't enough money, there wasn't enough power to tax, and they realized that you need to have this federation of states united in some way. And, and so the only way but you had to make compromises to get that, because these states were all fiercely independent. And so, yes, they basically say, yeah, you can be your own denomination. We're going to be a broadly speaking Christian nation. Mm-hmm. What they didn't say is Muslims can carve out Sharia areas, you know what I'm saying? Like within this country.
Yeah.
That would have been unfathomable to them.
Yeah, and I think part of the difficulty of this is we say the Founding Fathers and talk like it's this unified group of people.
Right.
It's this group of people who disagreed on everything,
Absolutely.
hated each other. Like two of them went out and shot each other in the street. Right?
Yeah.
So you
as good men.
Yes, so you have people like Patrick Henry who very much want this to be a Christian nation. Then you have John Adams saying America is not a Christian nation, right? And then you have Jefferson who talked about how he called them Mohammedans.
And Charlie Kirk started saying that.
He felt that they should have religion. He very clearly said they should have religious freedom. And so it really comes down to which of those guys are you reading? And that's part of the reason there's not a good answer, because it depends on which one of them you're looking at.
Yeah. So I would say the American creed has become one of the freedom. The old Lord Acton quote, freedom is not the right to do what you want, but the ability to do what you ought. And so I think we're firmly in the first part of that phrase, right? America has become a free country where you can do whatever the hell you want.
Right.
Bull crap. That is, you cannot have a civilization with that attitude. Right. America is a free country where you have duties and obligations to do what you ought. I just wrote an article, maybe it'll get published in the next couple of weeks at the everymancommentary.substack.com, where that's how Adam and I got to know each other through a mutual friend there. Anyway, it's called "Thank You for Voting?" And it's basically my reflections on working on election day, as I always do, and how we thank people for voting. And I'm like, why? Why do we thank people for voting? It's a duty. It's an obligation. And way too many people have that as a right. It's not a right. It's already a privilege. You have to be 18 years old, so not anyone can do it. You can't vote if you're a felon. There are restrictions around voting. So in concept, we don't believe in universal suffrage. And anyway, it's way too many people vote. That's a whole other conversation. But my point is that it reflects the fact that we thank people for doing this civic duty or obligation just reflects the culture as a whole, which is that, we don't go through our life as citizens of this country thinking, what can I do to make this better? Another thought. I was thinking the other day, because I'm a little pulled in a lot of directions. I'm on a board. I do stuff, obviously, at the church. I mean, that's my job, but I even do things above and beyond. I volunteer here as well, right? My family life, baseball, little league, and I'm thinking, sometimes I think to myself, and there are lots of American citizens, okay, who do not do that kind of civic work. They don't coach Little League. They're not on a board. They're not participating. This is bowling alone all over again. They're not participating in all the small groups, the civic organizations that actually make the damn country work. Not the president, not the federal government. All the Rotary clubs, the Lions clubs, the Kiwanis clubs, the bowling leagues, the churches, the food shelters, the homeless shelters, the food banks, whatever. I mean, times a million, right? Like all the unseen little things that like actually make up the fabric of a culture, of a society. And so many Americans, they don't even participate. They just opt out from all of that. They're just consumers. They just give me the TV, give me the money. And I'm talking about rich people and I'm talking about poor people and everyone in between. They just don't feel that like civic need. And my parents are extremely civic. My grandparents as well. Just it was just assumed. You're on boards, you do volunteer stuff, you do this, you do that, you do church stuff. And that's how I was raised and that's what I do. But I'm like kind of like running out of like hours in the day to fulfill those obligations. And there are organizations that need us to do that sort of thing or else they crater, and that's where the church is at. That's why the church has been at like a high stress level for decades and decades because the same amount of work has to get done with fewer and fewer people to do it or pay for it. And so anyway, the culture has become one of freedom and one of taking, not one of giving and essentially understanding that your freedom is the ability to do what you ought to do, which is a life of duty, a life of obligation, a life of service. And everything like marriage is the same way. People go into marriage with that same attitude, not one of duty and obligation. My wife's going to love this. But, it's the romantic, it's the feels, it's the you make me happy, all that kind of bullcrap. So anyway, that's what I think the American creed has become. And that isn't the American creed.
So you want to go back to JFK and ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
That quote is so far from the culture of this country. Yeah. I mean, am I wrong?
Well, and so part of what I think on this is that I think we have competing American identities throughout our country's history, right? You go back, if you ever read William Bradford's on Plymouth Plantation, he talks about this community among the Pilgrims, right? And they were on the Mayflower and people were dying and they were sick and they got off the boat and they had the starving time and they came together as a community and everybody had a role in helping each other. But then over in Jamestown, you have the frontier, right? And so you have these people going out on the frontier. And in a way, the American identity comes from the American frontier. It's, I want to be left alone. I'm going to make my own way in life. It's all about me, right? And forging new frontiers.
In what you said, I have a different interpretation. You said, I'm going to make my own way. But like, I would say that they were building a community. You know what I mean? Like, because then it became, it's all about me. Well, kind of like my land and, my empire or whatever. Yeah.
Capitalism, right?
Private property.
Private property.
Should have been life, liberty, and property, not the pursuit of happiness.
And so you have this kind of battle, right? Like you get to the Great Depression and America goes back to community, helping your neighbor, right? And that goes all the way up through the 1950s, right? My favorite Christmas movie that I watch every Christmas, It's a Wonderful Life. It's all about community coming together. And I think that really sums up a lot of the American spirit of the 1930s and 1940s, right? But so much of our time, that frontier capitalist idea comes back as well. And so I think through our whole history, we've competed between community versus rugged fight to the top individualism.
Yeah.
A lot of my research is on personal identity. And I think at the bottom of all these trends that you guys are talking about is that we've transmuted our core value as relates to the self, right? For many, many years, the American ethic was self-sacrifice. And that means, serving others, kenosis, emptying out of the self. Now the value is self-service. And this is where, all the talk of self-care comes from, and me time, and you do you, and everything else. So I think that that's really at the core of the problem. Once self-service becomes a virtue, like all this other stuff just dissolves.
Yeah, right. So I do want to say something though about, and this is going to be risque, perhaps a little controversial, but the American government worked because there was a culture of our first several generations that embodied exactly what you just described. First of all, they were a lot of second sons, has been commonly known, like people who left the aristocracy, left the nobility, because they weren't going to inherit it, because the first son got that. So the second sons came over and worked their butt off. And they were settlers, not immigrants, settlers. There's a reclaiming of that concept. And they came from, essentially, the British Isles almost exclusively for like a couple of generations. And so what was the culture of Britain at the time? What was the culture of those people that came? And then they came from Northern Europe for the most part. Even Lopez, what's his name in real life? The guy that Lomas,
Jonathan Keeperman.
Yeah, Jonathan Keeperman. Even he had a post. It might have even been related to the next article, where because people will say, well, what about all the Italians that came in, for example? Because the Italians were kind of the first of the non-European kind of blood, right, who kind of came over en masse. And basically, like, that's a success story, right? There are people who are worried about that. And his argument was, actually, people were right to be worried about that, okay? It was Italian culture was different from Northern European culture, and there were a lot of clashes, and they did, bring organized crime over in a way that wasn't around before. And yeah, they assimilated, but it did take time, and there were some bumps in the road. To compare that, though, to say, like half of Africa, or God bless all of my African friends, but there are some different cultures going on, or Muslims, or, people from around the world with like far more different cultures than Italians. The assimilation process, which we don't even demand, right? We just check a few boxes and say the right words to the flag and you're good. Mm-hmm. We don't demand assimilation. And so therefore, you can expect the cultural clash to be quite severe. And so, anyway, so I do think that like, There is a fragile cultural identity that certain people groups have habituated that makes the American system work. You can't have a free country if you don't have a culture of service. You can't. And I think that culture of service, of humility. See, I think of the settlers as coming over and like, I'm going to build my 40 acres or whatever. And I think, wow, that's impressive. I'm so impressed with that. I don't think it was about selfish. I think it was about like what it takes to survive. And it was a lot of poverty for a lot of people, for a lot of generations before anyone got rich off the deal. So I think that, yes, it's not about blood per se. I'm a Christian. I don't believe in ethnicity as giving anyone any right to anything. But yes, Northern European culture allowed, and the kind of cultural norms within those cultures of the Germans, of the Scandinavians, and of the British, largely, as a Lutheran, I can say German, Scandinavian blood and all that, or again, not blood, but culture. Yes, I do think it matters. I think for centuries, a culture had been developed that allowed a free country to survive because they brought with it not a gimme culture, or what JFK said, it was a how do I build this thing?
Two things. One, I think that the kind of community sort of ideal that you're talking about, the early republic sort of necessitated that. The conditions of making it in this wilderness where you had to be able to depend on your neighbor, the guy who lived, 300 acres away. Like you just had to. And, I'd ask you guys, I'm friends with my neighbors, right? But how often do you need your neighbor, right? It's very rare. And so we've gotten to a point where there's a level of self-sufficiency that sort of eliminates the need for some of that community ideal. But I'm going to push back on this blood idea a little bit. And this has been an idea that I've been toying with. So I'm going to run it by you guys. And it's going to sound a little icky, maybe. But risk aversion is an inherited genetic trait, right? Okay. We see this
just as a basic evolution.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Certain animals can be domesticated, right? We breed the ones that are less, or rather less risk averse. My point here is that what the American character shares sort of ethnically is that the overwhelming number of people here came from people who took a risk in coming here. They crossed an ocean. They left home. In the ages before sort of modern technology, that wasn't just, we'll call you on Sundays. It was like you're saying goodbye to everything.
Wow.
And and going into a place willingly that's defined by uncertainty. I think that there is a genetic basis to that predisposes one to take such an enormous risk. And I think that you give 250 years of interbreeding between people who are disproportionately not risk-averse people, and you do end up with a kind of new ethne. A kind of biologically unique characteristic that differentiates us from the people of other nations. The obvious rebuttal to this, as I've been writing about this, I haven't published it yet, so I'm thinking through it. But people would say, well, what about the slaves, right? They didn't come here voluntarily, right? Are they somehow less American? Well, no. And that's because at this point, after a couple centuries of interbreeding, every American's blood sort of flows and is intermingled with this sort of appetite for risk that has defined the character of the country, and I think made us as successful as we are.
Yeah. So the idea being that like America's sort of the Hunger Games of the world, right? Like America is strong because the strongest people, the least risk averse, those are the people who get here. But if that's the case, should we accept more immigrants? Because I mean, people trekking across the jungles of South America to get here, those are some pretty strong people. Do we want those people in our country?
Those people are coming here because they think that once they get here, there will be less risk.
They're coming.
But the Irish, the Italians, the same thing for all of those people, right? They were leaving potato famines and hunger, and other people were just like, I'm just going to stay here and die. But they're like, I'm going to get on a boat. I'm going to do whatever it takes to get to America.
Yes, but what they came, and this is the Ellis Island distinction. I have to remind my students of this. To what were those people entitled when they arrived on Ellis Island? The answer is nothing, right? Today, what are the people who make it across that desert entitled to? Well, public school, health care, in some cases a vote, right? SNAP, everything else. And this is the problem. This is what's driving immigration now, is that, well, what stuff do I get? What are the perks? And the point is that 100 years ago, there were zero perks.
And a lot of people went back. People don't, not everyone that came here stayed. A lot of the people who I think were like, we look at the tenements in New York City, right? These were these famous, I don't remember the name of the photographer who went in and like photographed, 12 people living in this apartment and, the tenements. I mean, it was like a whole thing of like how gross it was. And, it was because, they weren't entitled to anything. They didn't complain about their human rights being violated. A lot of them just were like, you know what? Actually, I had it pretty good in Italy. I didn't have to work so hard. I had my own bedroom, and there was a lovely girl named Gloria, and I'm going to go back to her, or something. So I think that's why when we use a word like immigrant or something, it's like, well, we have to really pare that down, and like different times of immigration are quite different. So, on the other hand, there are the people who are coming legally, I think, are probably more of that risk averse or risky gene or what have you. Right? They've got that, and they're willing to put in the time and to kind of make it. And some of them famously do, like Elon Musk or whatever. There are people who have come to America and been wildly successful and benefited our country. Who don't come from that same kind of stock. I'm going to be even more controversial than you, though. All right, and Sarah might be like, "Well, this is why I need to be at every event, so I can." But I'm not gonna say this like as a matter of fact, and this is what got Charles Murray canceled, okay, with his book The Bell Curve. But intelligence, I would argue, is at least 50-50 genetic. I think it's more like 80-20. And so again. The point of the bell curve was to say that with the loss of intelligence testing, because the Supreme Court made it illegal, we really need to reevaluate the harm that did to society. Essentially, what it disallowed America to do as a nation is to slot people into proper roles. And it basically said every American could become a college student. And that led to, of course, the great college inflation we're seeing now. Sorry to my college professor sitting here, but
you're not wrong.
Okay, so whereas my friends in Germany, they don't really have IQ tests, but they have various aptitude tests, and by the time you're 13 or 14, you are slotted onto a career path. Sorry for your lack of freedom, but it turns out like actually you should go into academia, and you should go into nursing, and you should go into mechanical trades, and so on and so forth. We don't do that in America, and so we have a while, because we can't tell the truth about intelligence because of disparate impact. Okay, that's essentially where that comes from. Mm-hmm. We can't slot people and help them and have a productive career. And so we have what the market is more than anything, it's a collection of information. And it's extremely valuable information, no pun intended. And what we've done on the question of intelligence is we've taken that bit of information out of the consideration. And so we have this important piece of information, into how society kind of functions. And so I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what to do with that. I would say that we need to go back. We need the concept of disparate impact needs to go away so that we can assess the intellectual ability of people so that they can flourish the most in a society. And those who, by the way, can't flourish in a society like this, we should help them. Like, that's fine. I'm not opposed to helping them. But so again, it's not about. It's like if you even say something like that, you're accused of being a racist, and you're accused of being the blood, and so you're accused of being a Nazi. It's not that. It's that if we can't tell the truth, okay, about the limitations of any one person, then we can't help them in the best possible way, and we can't do what's best for our nation. And that's something that most other countries really don't have a problem with. It seems like it's unique to us.
Yeah. So I'd push back and say that maybe that would be the case if everybody got the same K through 12 education, right? Because if you've got this school over here that's underfunded, and you've got poor parents who didn't graduate high school or never went to college to begin with, and you've got this school over here that they go to Europe every summer, and the parents have PhDs, and they have money, and they have tutors. And on top of that, this school is highly funded with the best teachers. This school is underfunded with the worst teachers. I mean, these people may have low IQs and these people high IQs, but on the test, these students are going to do better. And so I think we need to make sure we're adequately doing K through 12. And I personally don't think it's intelligence that shows success in college as much as drive and grit.
Agreed.
We have a lot of students that are lazy. And I think that this goes back to is the idea that we should run college like a business. Because in a business, the customer is always right. Our students are no longer students that we're raising up. We're service workers. Mm-hmm. We're the clerk that's giving them something, and what they're there for isn't an education; it's a piece of paper, right? And we see a college education like a store where you go buy that piece of paper instead of like a gym where you're buying a membership, and that personal trainer is gonna help you, but ultimately it's up to you whether you get the ultimate product or not. So.
Wait, flesh that out a little more. Who you're saying college should be run more like a business?
No.
It should be run less like a business.
Yes.
In that the customer's not always right.
Right.
In that basically the college says, this is what we offer. If you don't like it, go away. Whereas now you cater to students to buff up enrollment and stuff like that, which is why we need 600,000 Chinese students.
Sometimes when people ask me what it's like to be a professor today, I have to think about it for a second. And then the analogy I give was, imagine if you started a restaurant in the middle of a daycare. I'm the waiter. That's my job.
And certainly, I don't think universities are there yet. But for community colleges, we're funded based on our graduation rates. Mm-hmm. So there's pressure to pass people.
That's a bizarre incentive.
Yeah, it is, and it's a state of Texas law that we're funded based on how many people we graduate, which ultimately comes to how many people we pass, and. When we go to meetings, like a lot of times it's like on the first day, make sure you're standing in the hallway helping people get to their class because we don't want them to like give up because they can't find their class.
This is my exact point with my thank you for voting ? Article. Uh-huh. It's like, wait, like we're providing you an education at like a really good fee to help your career advancement. I shouldn't have to help you like know where to go.
Right.
Like we have to baby you. We have to thank you for
therapeutic, and I can tell you're well familiar with it as I am. There's this sort of sense that this student is kind of like a delicate alabaster thing that it's like, oh, well, don't stress it too much. It's it's going to fall apart.
Yes. And we go to trainings where we learn how to be better teachers. And I try to be the best teacher I can, but I hope that at some point my students have a really horrible professor, because they might not learn that subject very well, but they're going to learn a lot of stuff about how to have grit and determination to get through something. And I don't like, I actually, this might be a point of disagreement. I don't think it's liberal ideas that are causing this. I think it's conservative ideas. And it's this idea of running colleges like a business, like the idea that everything can be like a business. I don't think that works. I don't think that we should have people with MBAs running the college. I think it should be people with English degrees or philosophy degrees.
I mean, really, like, I don't know. I would say capitalism it gives you freedom to run it however you want, and if it makes sense to run it like a business and cater to students as customers, you can do that. If you want to run it like a military grade school and be like, yeah, you can come here, but, like, we're going to give you a dorm room and everything, I don't know. I mean, I think that should be an option.
I think it should be like military. We're training up the future, right? Mm-hmm. These are the future people who are going to run this country.
Dude, we're going to bring you to our side here soon, Cody. You're like so close, man. You're so close. Okay, let me move on. This. I'll just actually mention this quickly. This is a Jeremy Carl post. He wrote a book called The Unprotected Class, which you might check it out. Be pretty politically incorrect and controversial, but he is reposting something. He's actually reposting a clip from an American Enterprise Institute article from February of 25, which is really about immigration. No, it's actually about fertility, rather. And so, as we've talked about on the show a lot, you have low fertility rates, as the entire West does. And then what do you do to compensate? Well, immigration, that'll just kind of solve all the problems, right? Gives you more workers, gives you more people, gives you more taxpayers. Well, and one of the things we've talked about on the show, I've said is, well, yeah, they might pay some, in taxes, even if it's essentially illegal. In fact, did y'all see that article where the New York Times talked about identity theft this week? And it talked about a guy who stole someone else's Social Security number, and how the guy whose number was stolen, how it was horrible for him, destroyed his credit, his identity was stolen, all this kind of stuff he had to fix and all this stuff. And then it talked about how, like, the poor immigrant was reduced to stealing a Social Security number. The whole framing was like so screwed up. Even J.D. Vance retweeted it.
Both were harmed.
Yes, that was it. Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh. Anyway, the point of the article, though, which was about fertility, was really that unless someone comes to America and ends up in the 90th percentile, they are a net drain, essentially, on the society writ large, given all the benefits they take. That is education, healthcare costs, all the benefits they receive from the collective. Unless they end up in the 90th, they're a net drain. If you're in the 60th to 90th, you're a net. And which would be true of any American, by the way, as well. So I'm not... this would be true of anybody. And so you said earlier, you looked it up, the 90th percentile makes about $190,000 a year.
Right.
I don't know what the 60th to 90 is. I'm guessing probably, I don't even want to hazard a guess, but I would say probably like 75 to up to that amount would be my guess. So you're kind of paying in and you're kind of equalizing on that. And so his point is that the people, it's one thing for our own citizens, to sort of be a drain, you might say, financially on the body as a whole, but to import people with very little chance, given all the uphill battles they will face of the implicit racism in America, or they don't speak the language, or they don't have paperwork, to be able to be hired and all of that, the odds of them becoming in the upper 90th percentile are overwhelmingly against them. And so the argument, therefore, is that this is why we oppose illegal immigration. And even a lot of legal immigration is because unless they reach that threshold, they're at best going to be a even Steven, and at worst, just another drain. And again, I'm not saying they're, as a human being, as a Christian, I'm not saying they're, worth less as a human being, but every nation has to look out for its own interest. And so this is the number. 90th percentile. That's the number at which, someone becomes a more of a positive on a society. So I don't know. What do you think, Cody? You going to argue?
Oh, yeah, of course.
You're a resident token. Sorry.
Right. So, as the token liberal, I just want to point out that there's this idea that a lot of people have that all of us liberals support open borders and illegal immigration. Most of us don't. There's a small group of mostly young people in their like 20s or teens or whatever. But I bet you probably can't name me one like actual mainstream Democratic politician that supports open borders, right? So like the fight that we mostly have is what do we do with the people who grew up here, who've been here for a long time? But as far as legal immigration, I think it has, just pragmatically, I think it has to be based on our job needs. If we just can't find Americans to, I don't know, pick grapes or clean houses or whatever, then we've got to bring people for that. If there's some specific engineering job we just can't find people to do, we need to bring people in for that. And I think it should be more based on need instead of just wealth.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we would agree on that.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't know. I do think Joe Biden had an open borders policy.
I think Joe Biden was just taking a nap. So.
Well, I would say I think that all of the Democrats were complicit in what happened under Biden. They would never state openly, yeah, I want open borders, right? But like they do want them. That's why we had them. I will say that for me, the economics of this question, I'm done with that debate with like, well, are they a net financial gain or a net loss? I don't care, right? For me, it's the cultural question. At what point does the larger dominant values of culture start to flip or change because we've disrupted the cultural makeup of the nation to a certain extent? I'm curious about what you guys would say. So the 60 years that Ellis Island, 60 years that it was most active, receiving most immigrants, how many do you think it came through Ellis Island in those 60 years? Just a guess.
5 million.
Okay.
No clue. Yeah.
Okay. The number over 60 years was 12 million. Okay, or thereabouts. We took on over the 4 years of Biden, 4 years, not 60. Probably the official estimate is 12 million, but the probable estimate is more like 20 million.
Yeah.
Right. So we took in more. And we didn't even vet them. At Ellis Island, we were at least recording names, right? Yeah. We just said, hey, we ran past Ellis Island over 60 years here. And if that in itself isn't a justification for saying, you know what, America has always ebbed and flowed in terms of how many immigrants it's willing to take. You know, it's time. We've took on enough here, right? We can crack down on and tighten this up for a while till we get some assimilation. And that's going to be, of course, a concerted effort that we're going to have to find the will or the grit to make, because right now, you know, we are so embarrassed of the culture that to ask anybody to assimilate to it is seen as a grievous burden.
Patronizing, patriarchal, white supremacy, et cetera. Yeah. Well, I think we have an identity crisis in America. We don't actually know what America is. Like I said earlier, I think if I had to say it, I think the fissure is people think that America is a place where you get to experience freedom and do what you want, and that's what's so great about America. And I think, no, it's a free place. So we actually have to work even more to fulfill our duties and obligations and live in a sacrificial way and fulfill our civic mandates so that we can keep our freedom. And so you can't, what you have is a basically kind of, actually, I mean, I think Ben Shapiro, who I'm not a huge fan of, but his book, Lions and Scavengers, is kind of about this, is that you have kind of people who are willing to sacrifice for the good of the group and other people who just take. You can't have that for long. You see it in the tax structure, you see it in the voting patterns, obviously, like Ayn Rand writes about this. You know, you just can't have this imbalance forever. It is caustic, and it's proving itself to be so. To piggyback on that, and I'm just going to mention this because this could be a whole show in and of itself, and we've gone long, and I know y'all's time is valuable, especially the day before Thanksgiving. But the Department of State put out a tweet, and to summarize it, it's the first time the Department of State that I'm aware of, and this could only happen in a Trump administration, where they said to our European allies even that mass migration is a problem because it's a threat to Western civilization and it undermines the stability of that nation. And so basically, it's saying that mass migration there are human rights implications. And so you talk about the grooming gangs, you talk about people in their own country feeling unwelcome, becoming actually unsafe. If you look at the percentage of rapes committed by people who imported in Sweden, for example, it's almost not all, but the majority is now all done by migrants, even though they're a tiny fraction of the population at present. And so you see this happening in Ireland, you see it happening in Germany, you see it happening in all these countries that have done mass migration, that they do perform an overwhelming per capita amount of violent crime against the people that are there. And our State Department is saying, you know what? We're rethinking our relationship with you as a country because of what you have allowed to happen to your people. We're actually advocating for the British people, for the Irish people, for the Danish people, all right, for the German people. And that is a revolutionary step, I think. And, it says, for example, many girls were left to suffer unspeakable abuse for years. They talk about thousands of girls have been victimized in Oxford and Rotherham and other, this printing cutoffs, unfortunately I don't see it, but goes on to talk about German women who are raped. And basically, I don't remember our State Department ever doing anything but being glib and flippant about the actual harm, not only to a culture, but the physical danger that people are put in by migrants who come over who don't share, quote unquote, our values, And so I think this could be a landmark game changer. And you are seeing European countries now saying, actually, maybe we need to start deporting people. You obviously see the rise of the Nigel Farage's party. I can't remember the name in England. You see the National Front National in France and the AfD in Germany. Yes, they're all called Nazis. I mean, as a given, but they're all right-wing populist parties, basically on this issue. And the WEF and the globalization as a whole. But I think it's at least interesting. I think it could be one of those things that it's like a time bomb. Over time, it's going to just if the State Department gets another few years of saying this sort of thing and implementing this sort of thing, it could be a game changer on how we think about mass migration as a whole. So yeah, that's all.
I don't know. Like I tend to think that we should let other countries run their countries the way that their people want to, and maybe they want that, maybe they don't, but that should be their decision. I do see a contradiction. What does MAGA even mean these days, right? Does it mean we're going to export MAGA values to the rest of the world as American imperialists taking Trump's ideology to the world? Or does it mean America first, right? Because this isn't America first. This is like we're going to take our will and we're going to try to impose what we believe on other countries. So, I see a contradiction in these two things.
Yeah. Well, I think it's saying that our immigration policy now reflects America first. Mm-hmm. Okay? And that what we're saying is that for the good of your people, yeah, we think that you need to change your immigration policy as well. So they haven't threatened to stop trading with these countries. Right. They haven't threatened to shut off diplomatic relations or anything like that. But it's starting to lay a predicate that, well, obviously I think that MAGA wants to work with other populist nationalist, coalitions and cohorts around the world. And so I think they're trying to give rise to those, so that they can work with Argentina and they can box in, their proverbial enemies.
Yeah. But I think, especially in democratic countries, that it should be up to the people of those countries to make decisions. So.
I think that's part of what's happening is that the people of those countries are increasingly saying, we don't want this. And the state is saying, too bad.
Well, if you look, 32% or so of the English voted for Nigel Farage's party, I can't remember the name of it, in England, and yet they only got 6 seats in parliament, And so or you had Macron voted against, and he formed this coalition with his arch enemy to cut out the National Front. Mm-hmm. And so, the parliamentary system is such that even when the populist side wins, they still lose. So I think what the State Department is doing is, yes, it's exerting some soft power without USAID to say, hey, we want, it's exactly what J.D. Vance did at the Munich speech where he said, hey, you guys need to stop blaming the victim of rape here and get rid of the grooming gangs. I can't remember if that was his point as such, but that was the implication.
Well, I think that there's also this two-step that happens on asylum and refugees. It gives up the whole game that, like, well, none of these refugees from Syria, we don't expect India to take any of them in.
Yeah.
We don't expect Japan to take any of them in. We don't expect Nigeria to take any of them in. Somehow this burden only falls on Germany, Sweden, the United States, England, and the fact that it's only these sort of Euro-American countries that apparently have this moral obligation to do this that gives up the whole game and some of the ulterior motives that are animating the whole sad scene.
Yeah. Well, let's go from sad to happy, which was Mamdani and Trump in the Oval Office together. You seem hopeful about this, Cody. So explain.
Oh, yeah, I am. I think that just in general, I think the things that unite us are greater than the things that divide us. And I think during campaigns, I think this is a big problem with the way that we do campaigns. And I don't know a way around it because there have been people who are like, I'm going to run for office and I'm going to run a positive campaign. And those people lose. So we know that you run a negative campaign. But the way that I see it is imagine you have McDonald's and suddenly their new campaign ad is Burger King killing people with cholesterol, right? And so then Burger King hits back with negative ads. I'm going to stop going to both, right? And so with our negative campaigns, I think we create so much negative stuff and people just say, even like Trump kind of gave up the game in there, right? Where they asked him, like, you said that he's a what is it?
Fascist.
For Mandami. Communist, whatever it was that he said. And do you believe that? He was like, well, things are said during campaigns and now we're just having a good time. And I think that's really like, I don't think we're as divided as we think we are during campaigns. I think what we have in common is bigger than that.
Okay.
I would say this is the week we learned decisively that Trump is not a fascist. Right.
In case there is any doubt.
How we know that is that, Mamdani said in the Oval Office and after he left the Oval Office that Trump is a fascist. Well, do you work with fascists?
Yeah.
Do you
What
go
does that make
and
you?
meet with fascists?
Yeah.
Right. Of course you don't, which is how we know that he doesn't believe it.
Yeah.
Can I just be honest? I've studied like Nazi Germany and that sort of thing, but I still don't have a full grasp of what the word fascist actually means.
Depends on who you ask.
I think Trump has some authoritarian tendencies because I think he's been very powerful his whole life, and I think he likes to be like wined and dined, and I think he likes to get his way, and I think he does have a bad habit of like he reminds me of more like a king 400 years ago who people come in and, pander to him, and then he does what he thinks is in his best interest. And I think he does have a problem of putting himself before the country and before the Constitution sometimes and that sort of thing. Fascist,
Well, I
don't know what that word is.
I just want to note it. I also like being wined and dined, and I also like people agreeing with me. So if you're in that mode, please let me know. Call me. I don't know. I think that he is exercising his. This is a major debate. This is what Project 2025 was actually all about, which is about the limits and of executive power and in the three-party system that we have, and the whole debate around whether the executive branch, under which is the judicial system, is basically simpatico, or whether the attorney general has to be independent. All these sorts of things. So. I don't know. I think that what Biden did was with the immigration issue alone was like so much more heavy-handed, like by a million times.
That's I think what the left is talking about, in my opinion, when they say Trump is an authoritarian, is what they're really saying is Trump is wielding power the way we always do, and we don't like it.
I don't know. No other president has sent the military into cities to just kind of go. What you see with ICE, masked men just stopping and picking people up and sometimes arresting them, violently. And then it turns out, oh, they were citizens. And then they just kind of let them go. But just this idea of like people just disappearing, you don't really see, we've never really seen
This
that.
is just enforcing the law, right? I mean, this is what ICE is supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
Well, masked man just showing up and roughing up citizens on side of the street.
Dr. Fauci was masked.
And in a context where we're watching a freaking podcaster get shot in the throat on a college campus for saying mean things, right? I would want a mask too, right? For my own safety and for the safety of my family, right?
Because there are movements to dox. I mean, the App Store finally took off the ICE location apps. I mean, you would disagree that there shouldn't be people out there like locating and doxing ICE, right?
No, certainly not.
Okay, so I think that's all they're trying to prevent, given facial recognition technology. They'll be outed and their lives will be in danger. And yeah, we live in an assassination culture. I mean, people aren't above it. I mean, there are people following around ICE agents, in their vehicles now taunting them and things like that. So I don't know. Yes, sometimes they get it wrong and they arrest a citizen or something like that. But then there is due process for them as a citizen, and that's made right.
Even like you have things like the Canadian woman who she was an actress and she was in California and they were like, you're in the country illegally, your stuff isn't right, and she was like, oh, I thought it was. Well, let me get a flight back, and they said nope, and they took her to a detention center for like 2 or 3 weeks. And
that's how we should treat all Canadian actresses. I don't know what.
I would say that this is comforting. That this would say that, hey, this isn't some kind of racist game, right? That the Canadians are getting exactly the treatment that anybody else would get.
Yeah, but just in a country, in a country where we have our rights, where we have rule of law, I think it's just excessive force that we're seeing on a lot of these things too much.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree on that. We are very close to out of time, so I'm just going to mention this Christian Post article because other people have to read it and come to their own conclusions. We could literally debate this for an hour, but the Christian Post has an article called "Single Mom Battling Custody Order Barring Her from Taking Her Daughter to Church." And long story short, there's a divorce. There's a woman. She goes to Calvary Chapel Church, which is a kind of franchise church, if you will. Generally speaking, very conservative church. I think this is in Maine. And in Maine, and I get the impression that the father is not happy about it. So there's a custody dispute going on, and basically the court has said that Calvary Chapel is a cult or cult-like, and it has barred the mother from taking the child to the church. And I will say my initial reaction in hearing this article was on the side of the mom, but as I read it more and more, I'm not saying I still agree with the mom. But I understand the dad's point of view because I theologically disagree with so much of what goes on at Calvary Chapel. I don't think it's a cult. It doesn't have the hallmarks of cult. But there are many churches that are borderline and cult-like. And I don't know that this church is. I would have to kind of learn more about it to know. But I do think that churches that focus inordinately on doomsday apocalyptic scenarios and rapture, that is bad theology. It's really bad theology. It's false theology, and it needs to just disappear. So I am in no defender of that at all. I do think that it creates panic among children, or at least it can. It can create irrational fear because they assess things differently than we do, and that's a real problem. And if this daughter is a especially sensitive type, and apparently she was having panic attacks as a result and worrying about the rapture and all this kind of stuff, that's a problem. And the mom should be like, yeah, maybe there's a more moderate view on the rapture, and maybe I should seek it out. But she seems very committed to this church, as often happens. And so I do think that that's a problem. I also think there's a real problem, and I don't know if this is the case at Calvary Chapel, but in the evangelical church at large, there is a massive accountability lack. Mm-hmm. In my congregation, I'm accountable to my board. They function as our elders and deacons. Everything I do, they know about, basically. They know where I go. They know how I spend my time. Maybe not in detail, but if they wanted to know, I would tell them. Everyone here knows how much money I make. They vote on it every year. There's no secrets. It's all very transparent. A lot of churches don't operate that way. Right. They get yes men on boards. No one knows how much money they make. They siphon off money to tax-free shelters and stuff like that.
Or they don't have boards at all.
At all. And so I do think that is a real problem. And so I think there are real problems in the church, but people need to be responsible for getting out of bad situations. And I wish churches wouldn't focus so much on the apocalypse. Yeah. But it does get into dicey territory when a judge determines when a line is crossed into cult-like. And some of the things they said were, I don't know if I can find it, but it was things like, what does the church do that's cult-like? Well, they speak against, public schools. They're filled with hateful rhetoric. Well, that's a loaded term. Homophobia, disdain of science, and hatred of public schools. Well, you could say that about my church. We're the furthest thing from a cult possible. People leave me all the time. Yeah.
Those are all the gods, essentially this is a court saying that, you are blaspheming our gods, which are LGBTism, public schools, and science.
Right.
I think that this is a horrible ruling, and let's just say it is a cult. Are you not allowed to join a cult? If I am allowed to join a cult, am I allowed to raise my children in that cult? Right? Is this freedom of assembly, association, freedom of religion?
I see this case really differently. I don't focus so much on them calling it a cult. I think they the thing was that the dad said that it was a cult. So you have parents that divorced, and the mom wants to take the daughter to the church, and the dad's like, I don't want my daughter going to that church. That church is a cult. And so the court has this issue like this. It's a debate between the two parents about how to raise the kids. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's the state raising the kid, the state saying this is what we think. The state has to figure this out.
If I were the dad and I wanted custody on my kid, this is the exact right argument that he should be making, because like you said, he can be pretty certain that the judge is going to rule with him based on these grounds, because it's like blasphemy laws, but the left has its own version of blasphemy laws.
Well, yeah. And when I was reading, I was thinking about you being more conservative. Would you go with the dad and say the man's supposed to be the head of the household, therefore he gets to determine which church his daughter goes to?
Well, there isn't a household anymore, sadly. But I would say that, there is a whole unequally yoked thing going on here too, right? Where you seem to probably have two very different versions of Christianity if they're both Christian at all under one household, and this is the sort of conflict that is a result. Yeah. So I believe the man is the head of the household, yes, but there isn't a household anymore. It's been broken. But I would say also that remember when the Jehovah's Witnesses don't do blood transfusions, as an example. And I know that there's been court cases where a child needed it for their health care and the parents refused, and the court stepped in and made the child get a blood transfusion. And I'm kind of divided on that, because on the one hand, even though Jehovah's Witness is a cult for sure, meets every definition. Yeah. But I don't think the kid should have to suffer for beliefs that they cannot rationally
But this
hold.
is life-threatening harm. Right. So, right? The fact that I'm scared of the rapture is not the same thing. And this is, I assume the analog they would make on the left is, how is this any different than some of the courts who've taken children away from gender-affirming parents or gender-denying parents, right? Where one parent doesn't like the other's policies. The thing is, again, with the gender thing, this is involving radical physical interventions that are going to affect this child in a serious way. Right. Yeah. I'm scared of the rapture doesn't really qualify, in my opinion.
Well, but in a therapeutic culture,
yes,
kind of comes back to that.
That's a good point.
All right, we are out of time. Adam, where can people find you?
I write for all sorts of outlets online, but the easiest place to find me is on Twitter or X at the #1 Heretical Truth.
You can find me on TikTok, Cody Pogue, CodyPogue.
Good deal. And I'm Evan McClanahan. I make him nervous every time I say this, but I am at First Lutheran, flhouston.org. And, of course, thealgebythepint.org is where you should go to check out everything going on and what we have coming up. Come see us in person. We hope you have a very happy Thanksgiving, even for all the one negative thing we might have mentioned. And until next time, we encourage you to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.